What's up, y'all? It's Zach, and listen, y'all, Living Corporate is partnered with the Coalition of Black Excellence, CBE, a non-profit organization based in California, and bringing a special speaker series to promote CBE Week, an annual week-long event designed to highlight excellence in the black community, connect black professionals across sectors, and provide opportunities for professional development and community engagement that will positively transform the black community. This is a special series where we will spotlight movers and shakers who will be speakers during CBE Week. Today, we are blessed to have Clayton Bryan. Clayton has over 12 years of experience in the tech space. Initially working as a marketer, he transitioned into business development, and over the past 3 years has worked in venture capital. Currently, as a venture partner at 500 startups in San Francisco, Clayton is focused on the media, e-commerce, and frontier tech. Clayton is also one of the co-founders of Transparent Collective, a nonprofit launched to help founders of color connect with investors and mentors. Prior to returning to the Bay Area, as a member of the Dorm Room Fund team in New York, Clayton worked with and invested in some of the best and brightest student-funded startups on the East Coast. With that being said, welcome to the show, Clay. How you doing, man?
Zach, I'm doing great. And to all the listeners out there, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you might be listening to this. Happy to be here and looking forward to, having a good conversation.
Absolutely. So, look, man, of course I read your profile in the introduction, but for those of us who might be want to know a little bit more, I know I'm one of those people, would you mind talking a little bit more about yourself and your journey?
Sure. Happy to hit on some of the high notes and the milestones. So I'm originally from the Bay. Big shout out to Oakland. And, growing up, I always felt this gravitational pull towards technology. I was fortunate to be able to have a Apple II back in the day and play some games on that. Everything from Oregon Trail to Mavis teaches typing. Mavis Beacon teaches typing. Yeah. Those are some of the some OG titles. And
let me ask you this real fast about
sure.
those games though. Did you ever play this game called Gizmos and Gadgets?
I don't recall that one.
Man, it was really dope. Okay, but you said Oregon Trail. Did you ever play that Mario typing game where you typing in Mario movie?
Yeah, that was a classic too. So for everyone from that era, those were great, and I think that they did a good job of really kind of getting a lot of folks into technology and just bringing up that awareness. And so once I saw the application of that, and then I also was able to go to great places as a kid growing up in this area, places like the Lawrence Hall of Science up in the Berkeley Hills, and really getting to see all these cool things happen with science. And so when I got to high school, I started to code a little bit, and I took CS in high school. When I got to college, I thought that was going to be my track as well. But I happened to go to a school where there's a really tough computer science program, and I was like, actually, I think I'm a little more creative than this. So I wanted to touch technology, but not necessarily from the coding perspective. And so I became I was a poli-sci economics major, and then when I graduated, I joined Yahoo as a content marketer, and I was there for a couple of years. Then I decided I wanted to go do the startup thing, so I worked at a couple different startups, and that's when I started to really hear the term venture capital. And back in the 2000s, it was a very different time and place within Silicon Valley and the way that we think of things. Investors weren't blogging, they weren't tweeting. It was very obscure as to what investors actually did. Now it's different. Now, you see it's kind of a who's who on Twitter. Twitter has a VC category you can follow. There's Medium. It's just very easy to kind of stay plugged into that scene if you really want to learn how different investors are thinking. There's a lot of information out there. Back in the 2000s, that was not the case. But I was very fortunate at the time. One of the companies I was working with, we had done a Series A and a Series B, and also the check sizes were much different than a Series A and a Series B were today. But I was the seventh hire, and I got to really see, what these meetings with investors look like, and I was exposed to that. And I was like, this is kind of cool. This is interesting. And that's really, kind of planted the seed for me to want to be on that side of the table. And so fast forward a couple of years, my first kind of role where I was in an investor-like seat was running an accelerator program that focused on underrepresented founders. And so through that program, I got to know a lot of folks who I'm going to shout out later on in our conversation. But I got to see I was even closer. But the problem with that program was that we were not writing checks, and I wanted to actually deploy capital. In order for me to feel comfortable with doing that, I decided, okay, well, I want to go back to school, which was kind of a controversial decision at the time because I still think that MBAs are not necessarily all that welcome within the space. But I think it's changing now. But for me, at least, the decision was to go back, learn more about finance, build up that skill set, and then finally venture out as a venture capitalist. And so that's what I've been doing since 2015. And I've been incredibly blessed to join a great team at 500 and incredibly blessed to be a part of something called the Dorm Room Fund. And that's my journey in 3 minutes or less.
Man, that's incredible. And, it's interesting, to your point about some of your decisions being a little non-conventional. Still, you talk about, yes, there's definitely more information to learn about venture capitalism and being a venture partner. However, Clayton, I have to be honest, man, I'm still really kind of confused when I think about the role of a venture partner. So, would you mind sharing a little bit more and kind of breaking it down, what it is your role entails and what you actually do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. And, I think before I answer that, I'll answer a question that I think it is a good kind of intro or good for just context in terms of, how did I get here? And is there a certain path, right? I think a lot of folks that want to get into venture are like, well, how can I also get into venture? And I think, a couple of years ago, there were maybe two different pathways in where being a founder that had success, so exited a company, sold a company, right? That was a path. Another path would be, become an executive at a top internet company, a big brand that everyone in the space would know, and then really develop a skill set in sales or marketing or even people ops, and then market yourself to one of these firms as being able to add value. But today, there's so many different firms that are popping up. And I think that if you talk to the folks that are at these firms, they all have different pathways in. And so I think the primary thing is just have that interest and really network and be beneficial to founders, be beneficial to folks that work at these firms, do the job before you have the job. And I think that's a great way to do it. And there's great programs out there like HBCU, VC, Dorm Room Fund. There's a lot of different programs out there, depending on where you are at in your stage in life. We have one at 500 that's called Venture Capital Unlocked. First Round Capital has one called the Angel Track. So there's a lot of programs out there that will help you, kind of get the right skills because things change so frequently within this space. So I would say that was a little bit of the prelude to the next thing, which is what do I do on a day-to-day basis? Well, no 2 days look alike. I would say at the core of my duties, really, I'm out here trying to help founders. And so I'm meeting with founders all the time. If you look at my calendar at any given point in time, there's a lot of meetings with some of the current investments I have, some of the investments that are a little bit more mature, meaning that, I'm not working with them on a day-to-day because we have an accelerator program. And so it's essentially like a boot camp for entrepreneurs. So we're helping them with their marketing, their sales. We're helping them really craft the way they're thinking about their investor strategy, and then also with the execution. Because a lot of the folks that come through our program, they might be really good at their core competency, whether that's, data science or agriculture tech or, spinning up something, some kind of hardware play. But when it comes to the nuances around going out and fundraising and selling your business to the investor audience, it's a little bit of a different type of game. And so just understanding and acquainting yourself with the language and the types of models and terms that are being used at this stage. I'm talking about things as, far down as like customer acquisition costs, but just understanding things like, your revenue, your different growth rates, right? Like, and how to present that in a way that's meaningful, impactful, but translates well into the minds of investors. So a lot of what I do is coaching. I'm always looking for the next best, the next greatest thing, right? That I can invest in. But even if I can't invest in it right now, I still need to be able to talk with those founders, help them as much as I can, because I'm always looking for potential. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I'm all out there always looking for potential. So a lot of what I do, I categorize kind of as just like helping founders. That would be one big category. And then other things that I do is meeting with other investors and really trying to assess how they're looking at the market or markets right now, what's interesting to them, because as someone that's at the seed stage, at the end of the day, I need to have confidence that I can help my companies raise money. And if the later stage players are not as actively looking for deals in that category, it might not be the right time. Timing is so big in what we do, right? It's a huge thing. I would say timing and speed are so important. So you really have to get an understanding, if you're a founder, is this the right time for me to go and fundraise for this business? Should I try to hunker down, just focus on product right now, come out in 6 months when things might be a little bit different, right? So again, going back to that fundraising strategy piece. But a big part of what I do also is just networking with investors, networking with other stakeholders in the space, folks that might be doing product at Slack or Pinterest or wherever, and just asking them, what are you seeing that's interesting within your category, right? Because that's helping me make more informed decisions when I'm crafting my theses, my investment theses, when I'm starting to go out and I'm meeting with different founders, trying to see, can I find founders that think similarly about the way the future is going to be, and then can I back those founders? And that's at the core of my job. As someone that's thinking actively about my fiduciary duty to my limited partners, I'm constantly thinking about that, right? Constantly trying to think about the trends that not everyone else is seeing just yet, right? Especially at the early stage, that's what we have to do. We have to be able to look around, not the next corner, but 2 corners, because we're investing at such an early stage.
Man, that's incredible. And there's, I have a couple questions about that role and how you show up. Before I ask that question, all the things you're talking about and the brands that you're mentioning, and the conversations that you're having, I'm curious, how rare is it to see Black men moving in this space? I'll just say people of color, probably I'll just say non-white folks to start, but then
exactly
how rare is it? It seems like it would be rare.
I mean, like, it's rare to see women. It's rare to see Latinx. It's rare to see Black men. It's rare to see anyone that doesn't fit a certain profile, which you've already named, right? And so it is rare, but I think it's starting to get better. And, I can't quantify that growth rate, but I think that more and more investors are starting to realize that there's a need to have multiple perspectives, right? We can't all think the same when we're doing an investment. We can't all, have been trained at the same academic institution and travel in the same social groups, because we're going to miss out on big movements. And even on a geographical note as well, there's big things that are happening across the continent of Africa, right? And there's big things that are happening all across the world. And we can't just think in that tunnel vision of what's the next greatest thing that's going to come out of Northern California. We have to think, we have to think beyond that, right? And so there are things that are helping, there are things that are getting us where we need to be, but I think that the pace can pick up. And I mentioned, groups like HBC, VC, which I think are great, but we need more of that. And we need more funds like what, Chris Lyons is doing with the Cultural Leadership Fund. We need a lot of that. We need to amplify that times 10 at least, because I'm not seeing enough folks that look like me and have similar backgrounds when I go to these different conferences, different networking events. And I think that's problematic when we start to really see, what's getting invested in, who's getting invested in, right? There's stats out there that talk a lot about that, talk about, the amount of fundraising going to folks of color compared to, folks that are coming from, I'd say more common backgrounds within tech. And it's staggering. in terms of the disparity.
You're absolutely right, and we actually had an episode about that last season where we talked about being in venture capital while black, while being in venture capital while other, and we discussed the disparity and in fund allocation to the point where they were talking about certain demographics. It was like, to represent it in dollars would have been like basically zero, right? So it's nuts, and that so to your point though about the role, it seems as if your role requires like a cocktail of being able to kind of influence without direct authority, a lot of emotional and social intelligence, and then also all of that still being backed up by significant business competence. Can you talk a little bit about how you show up being, one of the few, and what is it that you're doing in these spaces that are majority white, and like what challenges, if you have any, have come with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like being able to paint pictures. Like, for one, I mean, you definitely need to have your facts, right? You need to have your facts and your stats down, and you need to be able to help those around you, and I'm talking about other investors, see what these trends are telling me. I need to translate that over to them, right? And I need to translate it over to them in language that they would be able to understand. Because at the end of the day, like, we're all here to try to, at minimum, 3x our money, if not greater, right? 5x, 10x. And sometimes, if these other investors lack that background, they might not be able to understand things in the same manner, right? And this is why I think every boardroom, and you're starting to see this within big tech companies like the Twitters and the Salesforces and the Googles of the world, where they realize they're building products for the entire world, so they need to have a team that reflects that, right? And so, but in the venture scene, we're not seeing that as we're not seeing it develop as quickly. So for me, in order to go in, I need to be able to pound the table, have the facts, but really build these theses in a way in which can align with what my firm wants to do, right? And so I think a lot of it is just like, you have to go the extra mile, right? You have to really put in that extra work, and it's making me a much better investor. But part of me is like, it shouldn't have to be this hard at the same time, right? Like, if I want to do a deal that's founded by a person of color, and I think that, and I'm able to show the data, the trends,
right?
All of this is really supporting going in this direction, right? And it's funny, sometimes even money that's coming from outside of the United States sees it better than money that resides within the United States. And because it's like they understand how emerging markets work. And so sometimes, if you put it in that lens, like, I mean, we're not emerging, but we have the same capability of an emerging market in terms of the growth potential.
Right.
Then a lot of the dollars from overseas are like, oh, I want in on that, right? And so sometimes it's just, you have to be creative, but like, you have to persevere. I think that's the biggest thing, is you're really like, you just have to keep willing to push through. And that's the same note that I want to give out to the founders listening, which is, you have to knock on, especially the seed level, you're going to have to knock on a lot of different doors. I have founders that come in and tell me like, look, I heard no 91 times and I heard yes 9 times, but that's all I needed to close my seed. So don't get, depressed. Don't have anyone try to knock you off of your hustle. You're going to just have to find the folks that your message resonates with the most. And so that's the message I want to give to the founders.
No, that's incredible. And you're absolutely right. My father, he's a bit of an entrepreneur, financial background, sales background. And what he always tells me is, he's like, son, you don't need but one yes. Like, oftentimes you just need that one. Like, people keep on, like you just said, the majority said no, but you really just needed like a scant few to say yes for you to continue forward. And I think it's hard though, when
it is,
when you continue to present and you present and you present, and who knows what those no's look like, right? Because a no is a no, but like, the way that they sometimes the way people tell you no can hurt. Like maybe you were told no like 10 times, even though you were just told no once. So those types of experiences, it's tough. So That's great advice. Before we let you go, do you have any other parting words, shout outs, or special projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so I just want to, give a shout out to Transferring Collective. It's a great initiative that we're trying to, continue, and we're actually looking for sponsors for that. So it's a great initiative. It's a labor of love, and I want to see that continue in the future. So folks out there that might be interested in sponsoring, hit me up. Big shout out to, and this is going to be a little bit of a long list, and I there's people that definitely, if it could be a lot longer, but I want to keep time in mind. So big shout out to Monique Woodard. She's done a lot to help me out professionally. Big fan of hers. Chris Lyons, Marlon Nichols, Kanye McQuebla, Richard Kirby, Eric Moore, Austin Clements, just to name a few. And then also, I love what initiatives like Black VC are doing, and also HBC VC, which I mentioned a few times in this podcast. So that's it. And also, one last shout out to all the founders out there, all the hustlers, all the innovators that are grinding right now. Keep building, keep moving forward, keep persevering. I know it might be tough. I know that, it might be disheartening when you hear no here and there, but you really got to keep grinding, and you will find your path. And, to the best extent that I can, I'm always willing to make myself available for folks that have questions on the businesses that they're building or the careers they're trying to build, because I believe that you really have to pay it forward in this world. So on that note, that's all I have, and signing off. Thank you, everybody. It's been a great pleasure to have this conversation.
Clayton, man, first of all, the pleasure has definitely been ours. Wonderful feedback, thoughts, and points of advice here. We're going to make sure that we list all of the organizations that you listed, that you named off, that you shouted out in the show notes. And then we'll also make sure to have your LinkedIn information in the show notes as well, so that people can reach out to you as they're able. Now, I think that's going to do it for us, folks. Thank you for joining the Living Corporate Podcast, a special series sponsored by the Coalition of Black Excellence. To learn more about the Coalition of Black Excellence, check out their website, cbeweek.com, and make sure that you actually sign up for CBE Week, which is going to be happening February 18th to the 24th, 2019. That's this year. Come on, y'all. In San Francisco Bay Area. If you go to their website, you'll be able to learn more, get your tickets, and all that kind of stuff right there. Now, make sure you follow us on Instagram, though, okay, at Living Corporate. And make sure you follow CBE at Experience CBE. If you have a question you'd like for us to answer and read on the show, make sure you email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, living-corporate.com. This has been Zach, and you've been speaking with Clayton Bryan. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.